Hi, everyone. Welcome to our forum on racial inequality being hosted by the School of Social Ecology. I want to remind everyone at the beginning that we are recording. So just please know that if you continue to participate, you're consenting that we are recording. And we're really excited to have this event today. We're going to begin by introducing ourselves, and then we're going to report very briefly. This is our second forum that we've held on this topic, so we're going to report briefly on our first forum, what the key themes were and a couple of actions. Then we're going to turn it over to our guests who are presenting today to share their thoughts on these issues. Then we'll open it up to Q&A. We'll begin by addressing several questions we received in advance, and then we'll open up the chat for any additional questions. So please remember to use the chat later on, when we get to the question and answer period. So let's begin then with introductions. My name is Susan Bibler-Coutin. I'm a professor in the Department of Criminology, Law, and Society, and I'm Associate Dean for Academic Programs in the School of Social Ecology. And I'll ask Dean Guerra to introduce herself. Maybe we should call on each other to do the introductions just to make sure that we go in order. Go ahead.
Well, popcorn. So hi, I'm Nancy Guerra. I'm the Dean of the School of Social Ecology. And I was just looking at the participant list as Susan was talking, and seems like we have a good mix of faculty, staff, and students, which is really what we were aiming for. So welcome everyone here. And I will ping it to Dr. Jazz.
All right, afternoon everyone. I'm Dr. Jazz. I'm a senior staff psychologist at the Counseling Center. And I will ping it to Milo.
Peace and good afternoon. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy Friday, as I like to say. My name is Dr. Milo. I'm a senior staff psychologist at the Counseling Center, and I've been on campus now for 7 years. And I will ping it to, let's go to Michelle.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle. I am the co-president for the Black Psychology Student Association, and I'm also a psychology major in the School of Social Sciences. And I'll give it off to Saad.
Hi, everyone. My name is Saad Iqbal. I'm going to be a senior at UCI. I'm a double major in psychological science and criminology in the School of Social Ecology. I am also your ASUCI Social Ecology Senator, and I'm really happy to see everyone here. And glad that we have a good amount of people who also joined and signed up, and hope to see a good discussion out of all this.
Thank you so much. And I really want to recognize our students for their leadership in organizing this event. We're really pleased and honored to have you as students in our school. I'm going to report briefly on some of the key themes from our first forum, and then we'll open it up to our speakers to make their comments, and Dean Guerra might have some additional comments when I go through the themes. But some of our key themes in our first forum that we held on this topic, one theme focused on voting and the question of what we can do as a school to support our students in being able to vote. Suggestions included perhaps allowing students to miss class in order to vote. I'm not sure if voting is going to happen in person or by mail, but anyway, facilitating that, holding information sessions so that people are well informed, or even publicizing existing information sessions. So voting was a theme. A second theme was how to better address mental health issues for our students. That's hopefully something we're going to be doing today through our guest speakers. But that's important, and not to address mental health generically, but to address mental health issues in a way that really attends to the needs of students of color and really all of our students. A third theme is to collaborate, or a third suggestion was to collaborate with other campus organizations in what we do. Again, we see that collaboration happening right now on this panel, but especially collaborating with Black student organizations on our campus. Another theme from our first forum was to consider trainings, curricular changes, those kinds of things. So we'd love to hear more about what people would like to see. And another theme was to consider taking action, whatever we can as a school, around the issue of policing. One idea that came out of our initial discussion was to reach out to UC Irvine's Public Safety Advisory Committee to see if they would be open to having field study students, since field study is such an important program in our school, to see if they'd be open to having field study students on that committee. So our director of undergraduate advising did reach out and was told that the committee is already large, but that they're open to just exploring ways of getting student feedback, such as focus groups and town halls. So that's something we can follow up on in the future. Another action item that we've taken since that initial discussion was to consider, a suggestion was to have our field studies students do patrolling rather than UCI PD around our school, and in particular, involve our field study students. And right now we're not doing in-person placements for field study because of the COVID-19 safer at home and guidances, but that's something that we can also explore in the future once we do have in-person field study. I also want to draw your attention to the chat, which has a link to a message that Dean Guerra circulated earlier this summer that summarizes many of the measures that we've taken as a school. So now I don't know if Dean Guerra or if my colleague, Associate Dean Richard Matthew, have anything to add to what I just said. Otherwise, we can open it to our panelists. Do either of you have anything to add?
Well, Richard got on, so I think he should introduce himself. And before you do that, I just add, as Saad mentioned in the chat, if you have questions that come up as we're talking, as Dr. Milo or Dr. Jazz are talking, you can either enter them in the chat or in the Q&A, and then we'll have time for Q&A. So I'll ping it to you, Richard, so you can introduce yourself. You had some Zoom difficulties.
Yeah, I'm having some connection difficulties generally here in University Hills. But thanks a lot. I'm Richard Matthew. I'm the Associate Dean for Research and International Programs and a professor in Urban Planning and Public Policy. I direct the Blum Center on Poverty Alleviation. I'm delighted to be here for the second meeting.
And I think it's amazing. Let me just add that we have over 50 participants, and as I mentioned earlier, it's really a cross between staff, faculty, and students. So we're all really here for the same purpose, to try to move forward in a productive way. So Susan, I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you. I'm going to invite our students, Saad and Michelle, if they would like to say anything further to introduce our speakers. We've already heard everyone's name, but I don't know if they have anything to add. And then I'd like to open it up for our students and for our Dr. Jazz and Dr. Milo to make the remarks. So let me turn it over to Saad to take it from there.
Well, I don't have too much to say. Just thank you for them for coming. And this is one of the first steps. I want to see more interdepartment collaboration. And I also want to give a shout out to Ritu Sharma for helping me set up all of this. And also another friend, Amy Lau, for the flyer. I'm super thankful for that. I hate making graphics. And so I just always have friends help me with that. And I appreciate them so much. Michelle, do you have anything?
Yeah, I would like to say that I wasn't able to make it to the first discussion, so I'm really happy to be here and to be able to talk with you all about this important topic.
Yeah, and I will just like to add that, these topics are really, really important to have. They could be heavy at times, but I would see every opportunity to have a conversation like this as the beginning. And so there's more and more conversations to be had. There's more and more actions to take. And so even if you've had conversations before this, I would see this one as the beginning. And I would also share that, during this combination time, I like to call it a combination time of civil unrest, pandemic, unemployment, what else we got? There's so much going on. Everything going on, that, mental health is a struggle. And so I think that's the other, thing we want to be able to discuss here is really how do we cope with all of this? And so thank you for having me, and I'll turn over to Milo.
Yeah, similarly, I just want to start off with sharing gratitude for being in this shared space. It is a very, very unprecedented and sometimes difficult time for a lot of us. So I think for me, similar to what Dr. Jazz was sharing, a lot of this topic, a lot of this conversation does feel heavy at times. And when we think about heaviness, when we think about challenges, it feels a lot easier to carry heaviness with shared hearts and shared hands. And so as we're in this collaborative space, I'm really excited to be partnering with, campus partners and first and foremost with students, because I'm very clear, like I have a job because of the students, and I'm really honored to be able to support y'all and to be in this shared space. So thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Well, let me then ask Dr. Jazz and Dr. Milo, if you have concrete suggestions. You both mentioned the importance of community. You both mentioned the importance of attending to mental health issues. Maybe you each could take some time to share your thoughts about the key steps. What are the concrete practical steps that we can take, number one, and what all of us can take, and our students in particular. And then secondly, how can we as a school best support our students and our colleagues as during this time of combination, as you put it, Dr. Jazz?
So I can start. I feel like what has come up for a lot of people is feeling the sense of just being overwhelmed. Doesn't matter what you identify as, but feeling overwhelmed has been a strong theme, and you may be overwhelmed in different ways. And so I feel like the first thing that we may have to do is assess like our capacity for being as engaged as we have been with regard to social, family, news, any of the other responsibilities. It's okay to like take a step back. It's okay to say no. It's okay to set those boundaries, particularly for self-preservation. I will let Milo talk about self-preservation. But it is really, really important. We have to take care of ourselves in order to be able to manage everything going on. So setting boundaries is a very tangible thing to do, and it may be different for people. Like people are used to doing so much or not used to saying no, but it's probably one of the key things. And it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter how you identify, but boundary setting is crucial. The other thing that I will say is, like we said earlier, even though having these conversations is heavy, sometimes it is actually aiding in the mental health of everyone, because it's one of those topics, such as Black Lives Matter. It's a topic that has felt, invalidating for a certain group of people. I identify as Black, and I think that now in 2020, maybe it's because no one has anything else to do but to watch the news. We are stuck inside and we have to face it, but it feels like people are having the conversations, and that's really helpful. It makes me not feel like my experience is invalid and it doesn't exist. It also feels really refreshing to hear other people who don't identify as Black start to speak up and, share their concerns and their issues with the society that we live in. And the other big part is whenever people who may not have recognized in the past recognize their role now in playing their role in like either the kind of racial tension, even if it's intentional or not. So I feel like taking ownership and responsibility, that could be very, very healing for people to kind of stand in it, because you have to, in order to move forward, you have to be open to feedback in order to move forward. And I feel like with regard to the campus, I think that that's kind of the bigger piece here, is allowing voices to be heard, acknowledging that racism is a problem and an issue, is allowing voices to be heard. So I think on a campus level, on a department level, any way that there's platforms for students to share and express what's going on and not shutting it down is another way of acknowledging and allowing voices to be heard. So those are the things that I can think of right now. I'm sure more will come.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Dr. Jazz. And I wholeheartedly agree with the importance of self-preservation. A lot of that comes with understanding what that even means. So making sure that you can still live and experience joy in the midst of sorrow, and being able to experience joy when we're a part of systems that, as we've seen from the news, as we've seen from history, that sometimes don't want us to exist. And so when we think about not just preserving our life, but actually enjoying and experiencing joy in our life, that looks like prioritizing self-care. And so, and not just self-care in action, but self-care at its best is a mindset. So when you're able to reflect and say to yourself, you know, I deserve joy, I deserve to be here, creating that inner sense of belongingness, that is resistance, that is creating healthy boundaries, as Dr. Jazz was talking about. And it's also about being able to prioritize yourself. So I'm not, you know, I work with athletes or esports folks. I'm not as interested in performance as an indicator of wellness as I am about your sleeping, your appetite, your interpersonal functioning. So we look at those as concrete ways to, again, prioritize Black lives. From a systems level, I think one of the things that I've been saying through the pandemic and through the plague of racism is to listen twice and speak once. Whether or not you are a Black identified person, whether or not you are a person of color, being able to listen to the person who's sharing their pain with you and sharing their experience is more important than how you respond at times. Creating that space is critical. And when we're talking about managing racism on a system level, being able to acknowledge the very, very real and concrete impact that racism has on health. There's no health without mental health. And there's also plenty of research that shows the negative impact that racism has on both physical and mental health. So systems in place to be able to support the health of our beloved students, and again, not just helping them get through, not just helping them survive it, but to actually encourage thriving and the joy.
Thank you so much to both of you for those remarks. I want to hear or give our two students an opportunity to comment as well, or to pose questions, either comment or pose questions first. You know, from your own experiences as student leaders, you know, what do you see as either the key challenges or key strategies that you've noticed, either challenges or strategies that you've noticed that you find can sustain students, or, you know, perhaps you want to ask further questions of Dr. Jazz or Dr. Milo. So I don't know if Michelle or Saad have either remarks to make or questions to pose.
Michelle, you can go first.
I think that on campus, a lot more has to be done in terms of the retention for Black students, but also looking at hiring more Black faculty and staff. In my experience, I found that when taking African American courses, I don't see African American teachers. And it's quite disheartening to be on campus and to see microaggression and to experience racism and discrimination, not only as a Black person, but as a Black woman. And I think that this is a topic that is important that we're talking about it now.
As a student leader, you see a lot of students not putting in enough effort for their mental health. like in ASCCI specifically, I see a lot of burnout, especially because they're putting in so much work and effort to do as much, but then when they don't see their efforts come fruitful and not seeing how like nothing's working, it really hurts them. And then not seeing students thriving, in the end, it hurts everyone. And working to make sure that the students are always first, making sure that the students are doing well should be always our top priority. And recently, especially like for myself personally, like mental health, like I never really thought of it as a concept till I got into college. And then especially being at UCI, I've learned so much about it, especially since my third year and learning more about it. And I think it's a journey and continuous effort to keep on learning more about it. And it's not just a one-stop chapter that you just learn from a textbook. It's a continuous effort to learn more. And I think we need to make sure to educate our students, our leaders, in every platform, at every single level, to that put focus on your mental health and keep on learning. Because as a Research One university, we need to, education is our main goal and our best tool to use. So we should be putting efforts into that and making sure that we put the students' wellness at first. And I know that the School of Social Ecology is also putting that effort with the wellness and social ecology, and with Dr. Schuler's effort as the faculty or director. I know that that project will definitely be something in the future that will blossom, I think, and be very fruitful for the School of Social Ecology. So I really commend him and all the other individuals who have worked on that to really push for this and putting more effort into the wellness of students.
I'd like to invite Dean Guerra to briefly describe the initiative that Saad just mentioned, the Wellness and Social Ecology Initiative, just in case not everyone who's participating is aware of it.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Well, we've been committed to mental health and wellness for quite a while, and we have a program in clinical psychology, a PhD program coming on board. And we've always felt that the Counseling Center does a fabulous job, but we know they're overloaded too, and that a lot of things happen at the school level and they happen immediately. And we've heard from many, many students how when they have a problem, they need to either talk to someone or they go in their car and they cry or they yell or something. And we're trying to be able to be a bit more responsive to student needs, but also to connect with Orange County and really kind of build a mental health and wellness agenda. And so really, thanks to Dr. Stephen Schuler, we were able to get $2 million in state funds to start an Alcove Center, which is a student-led, the model of the Alcove Center, which started as Headspace in Australia. It's a student-led and really student-focused or youth-focused center that kind of is driven by what youth want, not what adults think youth want. And so we have a youth advisory board. We're going to be working on campus. We'd like it to be, and we're very connected with the counseling center, but we really want it, we see it as a kind of a web of services within each school, across the schools, at the campus level, and at the community level. And so that we can also connect the kinds of programs that we as a PhD program in clinical psychology with a lot of clinical faculty design, evaluate, and fortuitously, I guess, in terms of timing, Dr. Schuler has done a whole lot of work in technology and mental health. And so we're really looking at, with this center, integrating technology, reaching out to students. I mean, one of the things that we find, and even looking at ways of teaching for the faculty who are participating in this call, and for students that can facilitate mental health and wellness and reduce stress. And I'm always, and I can't even imagine now with COVID and unemployment and racism, the level of stress that students feel, because I think before all this, the level of stress that students feel just trying to manage classes and work and commuting and life and the developmental transition of late adolescence and early adulthood, you know, now it's compounded. And so we're trying to think of even things like, if you have a midterm and a final, just as an example, and you do poorly on your midterm, where you're pretty much done, you know, you don't have a lot of hope, and everything rests on the final. So thinking about procedures like having 3 exams, you know, and you can drop the lowest one, or you can take the final to replace it, just different ways systemically to deal with mental health and stress and wellness, and not just by another counseling appointment or another app or something like that. But there really are, and the kind of, our school is built around this idea of systems level change and systems level integration. So we really look at wellness as a system, and how the university and how our school can help promote it. And now it's particularly acute with all of the stressors and challenges. And I know I even share with you today, I was having like a Zoom crash. And I was just like, I can't look at one more meeting on, 9 squares on a screen. I feel like I'm in Hollywood Squares for all of you who are my age or around there. You just, it drains people. So, we need to, and then I kind of went like that. I go, okay, you're the dean, you can't get drained. You just have to, suck it up and move forward. And it's the way it is. But, I think it's wearing on people. And so we want to connect that, but we also, we want to respond to all of the challenges around racism and social injustice, which has really been a cornerstone of our school. I mean, we have so many faculty working in this area and doing so many things. So we feel like if we don't respond appropriately, we're really letting people down. And so, I don't want to spend the whole time talking here, but we want to look to you to help let us know what to do. And we were very cautious in our response, because we didn't want to just say platitudes and here's $50,000 and we're going to do 5 projects. We want to make a difference, and we want to do things that'll sustain beyond a funding initiative or something like that. So we want to hear from you and your ideas and what we can really do. So I'll turn it back to you, Susan.
Thank you. I wanted to, I know we'll open it up to questions in a moment, but I wanted to ask my colleague, Richard Matthew, to comment just on, Dean Guerra just referred to a lot of the work that's happening in our school already. And I don't know if you'd like to just highlight some of the themes that you see in the research that our faculty are carrying out already that relate to the themes that we're discussing right now, from racial inequality to mental health issues, to social injustice more broadly.
I mean, sure, I'm happy to talk a little bit about that. I think that one of the things that's important, and I do have some reflections that I'd like to share at some point on what Michelle said about much more needs to be done, because I think that is really sort of at the heart of the issue. But there's no doubt that for the past 30 years, since the School of Social Ecology was set up, it was committed to rigorous sort of science around complicated social issues and to justice. And those are the sort of the two things that are most deeply inscribed in this school. And as a result, we have a long history of people working on, issues like discrimination and its impact on heart health, or the penal system and inequality and racism in our justice system. And we have a whole group of centers: the Center for Evidence-Based Research, the Center for Law and Society, the Center for the Newkirk Center for Science and Society, which houses the National Registry of Exonerations, the Blum Center for Poverty Alleviation. All of these have focused on issues of inequality and injustice, often explicitly on issues related to race for the past 3 decades. And so there's a body of research. Just in the past couple of years, we've had Michael Mendez has written about climate justice from the streets, and Maria Rendon has produced an award-winning book around the experience of immigrants in this country, in inner cities. And we have a long history of that sort of work. We are developing, because I don't want to take up too much time here, a comprehensive, detailed list of research over the past 30 years about race, inequality, and justice that our faculty and graduate students and undergraduates have participated in. And I think it's quite impressive. It gives us a certain platform for which I think to help build that bridge from symbolic expressions of support to real priorities and programs and budgets, which will be, significant and enduring and make a difference. And I'd like to talk a little bit about those later on. But yes, we have a long history of doing this sort of work. We have a lot of faculty deeply committed to it. I don't think we necessarily always showcase it as well, but it is an important element of moving from from expressions of concern to doing something is the sort of evidence and research that a university can produce. And I'm not saying it's free of bias. Of course, we're always asking ourselves about how to correct bias in our research and things like that. But it's a valuable source for people, and it can be mobilized around the concerns that are so contemporarily sort of critical. So I'm happy to share the sort of more information as appropriate, and we're trying to figure out the best way to disseminate it. But I'll stop there because I could go on for a long time about our research.
Thank you so much. We're about to open it to question and answers, but does anyone, now that everyone's had a chance to speak briefly, does anyone have any thoughts about what anyone else said? Did anyone's, in listening to each other's comments, did it spark anything for you, Dr. Milo?
Yeah, I wanted to add, I think it was connected to what Saad had mentioned around kind of the growing awareness about the importance of mental health. And one of the things that I always encourage folks to consider is mental health, just like any physical health approach, it's really helpful to also take more of a preventative approach and not wait until we're feeling like we're in crisis, not waiting until we feel like we can't get out of bed in the morning. So, and granted, that requires or assumes that folks have access to mental health. And I think both at the counseling center and then our database of community providers is really helpful for supporting students with that. But the point I'm wanting to make here and to clarify is that an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of intervention, as the saying goes. And so not waiting until we have to intervene or again, after something bad happens, but thinking, hey, mental health is an ongoing process that I'm always going to want to support. Whether I'm a student, whether I'm a psychologist, or whether I'm a dean, I have mental health, and I want to actively take steps to support that for myself and also connect with others who can encourage my mental health. And last thing I'll share, as Dr. Jazz had mentioned, making sure that we're creating intrapersonal, so within ourselves, as well as interpersonal with other people, boundaries when we recognize, hey, you know what? I'm not really feeling too well right now. Let me take some time away. I feel really oversaturated with seeing the news. Myself in particular, seeing Black folks die on the news is overwhelming at times. And so what I do is I'll tend to watch news in the middle of the day instead of at the beginning or the end, so I can kind of like buffer that out as the day progresses. But I'll stop with that and just say I want to highlight the importance of preventative mental health to help encourage that ongoing growth.
Is it okay for me to speak? Okay. I guess based on also what Milo said about preventative, just an ounce of prevention, I want to tie it back to Michelle and her comment around needing more representation of people that look like her, look like me, look like Milo on campus in general, because that is preventative. It can help with mental health of Black students by seeing either older peers or professors in positions that they may have in the future. Can feel very discouraging to not see representation around you or even have mentorship right there on campus, because they may have gone through something similar. To not have someone to go to and talk to about your experience as a Black student at UCI. And so I would say that, mental health is something that you can do personally by going, but also the actions and the steps of the campus. Prevention, I would say, includes, recruitment and making sure there is a substantially larger number of Black faculty and staff and students on campus just to be able to have that community.
Thank you. Saad or Michelle, do either of you have, Dean Guerra.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add one thing, because it would be really helpful for the administration and faculty if you could help us think of things that we might do to be more attractive to people of color, to Black faculty, to Black students. I mean, Irvine's just not a place where, it seems it's not where things are happening, and it's hard in general. And if there are things we should be doing to showcase Black lives, to do more to attract Black faculty, because we generally lose out to other places when we do try to recruit. So, and admissions, if there are things we can do in admissions, and I don't know if, there'll be some policy changes that will help us out. We want to know that, because it's not good enough to just say, Irvine's not exactly a diverse community. It's hard to recruit people to come here, and they go to LA, and I don't blame them.
I think one suggestion
Go ahead.
would be, when you try to recruit Black people to come to this school, it's all very fancy, right? When you first show up, it's everyone saying, we're here to support you. And then you actually get to the school and you see the opposite. And so I think part of it is funding Black organizations on campus, funding Black Greek life on campus, and just making sure that you're supporting the people that you want to be there. So that's creating programs and allocating money to be able to keep them there.
That's a really fair and good point. Thank you.
As for me, I just wanted to repeat, I guess, what I also was trying to push for last time. I think a lot more interdepartment collaboration with more Black student groups, and also with the CVCRR. I think that will be one of the biggest things we can really do as the School of Social Ecology, and also other departments at UCI. Try to show that, we're not just not in words that we're in support of them, but through the actions, because obviously actions speak louder than words. And that should be our always first instinct, to do something rather than just say something, and pushing that for more action on our part. And we should be the first ones to take that step, take that initiative, rather than them coming to us. But we should be the ones, we have to be the ones to be taking that first step.
And I will just add on to what both Michelle and Saad said. I think that if I was a new recruit, I would appreciate them, making me feel welcome, and, it being fancy, and also providing a list of everything that they're doing or what programs are there to support. I would appreciate it more if there was also demonstration of like the internal work being done, so just like being more sensitive to how you may approach someone who identifies as Black, because I'm thinking of it not being enough to be next to someone who's saying, this, and this is available for you, without feeling like they're available for me too, type of thing. Like there has to be some internal work and effort going on, instead of just like a shiny brochure. There has to be like realness. And that is just coming from personal experiences, but also I could see that being a turnoff. And I feel like it speaks to Saad and Michelle's point.
Thank you. I think the emphasis on authenticity and action are both really well taken points. So thank you for that. I want to turn to taking some questions. And I'm going to start with the questions we received in advance, and then I'm going to turn to the questions and comments that have come up in the chat. And in the question and answer, we have two different things going, I guess, at the same time. But ahead of time, two questions I'm going to group that I'll pose to our panel had to do with safety. One question focused on how people can feel safe while participating in protests, and particularly participating in online activism, where you don't know who's seeing you, who's going to find you, particularly in this day and age when there's a lot of cyber surveillance. And relatedly, how do you respond when you encounter racist actions or depictions in our community, not necessarily on campus, but the example that was provided with this question was off campus, seeing someone driving down the road with offensive statements or objects on a truck, right? So how do we respond to those incidents? What are your recommendations?
Do you want me to go? And so I think there's a couple different pieces when we're talking about safety. We're talking about our physical safety when we're in different spaces, as well as protecting our emotional safety, our emotional well-being. As a psychologist, I want to spend more time on the latter part and focusing on the emotional safety. But just as a quick answer to the first question, I always encourage students to think about not posting or not doing anything online that you don't want somebody to see at a later point, because your digital footprint is forever. So of the trainings that I've gone to and the trainings that I've either like learned from or led, thinking about the like I said, the digital footprint lasting forever. So being really intentional about where we're engaging in things and when to take those conversations offline, to then, again, I'm going to the emotional part of it, to receive more of the emotional support from others. If you see something online that makes you feel unsafe, to be able to reach out to either a friend, to a loved one, to get that emotional support, to be able to report it appropriately. Some of the social media platforms are doing a better job about making themselves more accessible for hate speech, etc. And I think if you see an action out there, again, to know that you are supported and you deserve to be able to connect and feel safe in all the different environments that you navigate. So if you see something out there, knowing that there are people like myself and Dr. Jazz who want to support you on campus and in the community as well, to get that communal support. And I'll pause there for a second. I don't know if Dr. Jazz, you wanted to add anything else in there?
I think just to add to what Milo said, I think as it relates to feeling safe with regard to online social activism, I completely agree with Milo. I think that one, you want to assess your capacity. I don't think that you have to feel like you have to be involved and engage in every single thing. I think you definitely want to reflect on what you have the capacity to do, and then also what you choose to put out there, you are okay with it being out there for anyone to see. And, you know, also setting boundaries like we mentioned earlier. So taking a step back too can provide a little bit of safety, because you're going to be more times than not able to recharge, come back with a clearer mind. You know, there could be some things that are out there that can be emotionally charging, and then you may respond impulsively. So you may want to take a step back, think about what you want to say, or take a step back for a while, maybe not respond. So really assess what your like instinct and your like quick responses. You know, you don't want them to be detrimental. And then as far as seeing things outside of campus happen, again, I would go back to your capacity. Do you feel like you have the energy and capacity to either say something or do something about what you just saw? Because the fact of the matter is it's going to happen all the time. It's all around us. And I think people are just more and more aware of it. I don't think anyone has an expectation on one person to be the hero of everything and to save every situation. So you just need to check in, like, do I have the energy today? Okay, so I will go and say something. If not, keep it moving, because there's going to be another opportunity.
Yeah, I love that, Dr. Jazz, because it's, you know, on the days, you know, culturally we say, oh, I got time today. On the days when you have the time and you have the capacity, that's when it's like, all right, these Twitter fingers are going to put this work in. Other days, though, I really want to encourage folks here, because disengaging from social media, other online platforms is not the same as being disinterested, is not the same as being apathetic. And in actuality, that's a way of you supporting and protecting your mental health. When you disengage, if you don't have the capacity for online interactions, for public interactions, what have you, that's not an indication of you not caring or you caring any less. I think continuing to fight the plague that is racism, which is older than America has been America, it's going to take a lot of communal healing and communal action. So making sure that you can stay in the fight for as long as possible without burning out, because we all need to connect with each other to fight this. So you disengaging actually allows you to stay in the fight for longer, and that's really, really necessary for the work. But above and beyond everything else, we just want you to be well and to feel well, and disengaging is really necessary for that.
Thank you so much. Another question we received in advance had to do with performative or symbolic allyship, and the question says symbolic social media posts, etc., sometimes pop up in response to horrific events. Some are accused to be performative allyship with no resources dedicated to pay for the time of people of color members or sustain the work. What has UCI done differently this time around when it comes to Black Lives Matter? I think we've already heard some recommendations regarding this, such as recruiting and retaining faculty of color, students of color, and also supporting organizations on campus and really being there for each other in that way. Does anyone want to add anything about this theme? Because I think it's a really important one.
I mean, I can't really speak on the terms of like UCI itself, but I think just as another individual, I feel like oftentimes we feel obligated, but at the end of the day, you're not necessarily obligated to do anything. And if you can't post, if you can't come and support in the protest, or you can't donate, I think just telling them and just, in your own heart, like, I'm here, I'm supporting them, is like something that you just need to be able to do. And you don't have to be doing something physically or like donating money. As long as you know in your own heart that, I'm here to support them, I think that's like the very biggest thing that you can do. Because obviously everyone has their own situations, but I think just knowing that, I'm here, I support them, is what you can do.
I think if I can just add one thing that, we as a school have been trying to be really thoughtful, and I mentioned this earlier. We don't want to just have a knee-jerk reaction and, quick fixes, because, racism, oppression, cruelty, inequality have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and it's not going to go away tomorrow or in a month. That doesn't mean there aren't short-term things that we can't do. And, you put that against the backdrop of what's happening in our country, which is insane. And I know I'm being recorded, but I mean, it's just literally insane. And, we think about when we started talking about this as deans, the first thing that came to our minds is, let's figure out a way to get out the vote. Because if we don't change things, we're not going in the upward direction. We're going in the downward direction. That's a real practical and frustrating for us as non-young people, is that young people don't show up. We need to we have a very concrete goal in the very short term, which is get out the vote and change things and vote people in who are going to craft policies that are not going to be as hateful and horrific as there's bad and there's horrible, and we've gone from bad to horrible. So there are things that we do, but we really want to be thoughtful, and we want to do it in partnership with you. And, I think someone brought up in the Q&A and in the chat, we want to look at our courses. We're looking very carefully at field study, as Susan mentioned, and figuring out how we can really interconnect social justice with field study. we're starting a project with prisons of students doing interviews with staff and prisoners and really trying to understand, because if you look at a marginalized group, tend to be minorities, poor, and then locked up and, you know, basically disenfranchised when they get out. So we really want to be thoughtful. And I know, Richard, you had a couple of words to say. I should ping it over to you.
Sure, because I think this is really, really important. And I think that, you know, whenever people are exposed to some, you know, or forced to deal with some really big type of injustice, you're going to stimulate expressions of concern and solidarity and all that. There's going to be lots of symbolic gesture. That's normal. It doesn't matter whether it's Reform Wall Street or Black Lives Matter or Me Too or climate change. What happens, of course, is then people don't have the time, or they're not sure what to do, or they don't know how to sort of choose among different approaches to dealing with the problem. And we have something like this that has a 400-year history and that is deeply, deeply embedded in so much of our institutions and practices and values and beliefs. It can be overwhelming. And I think that what we're trying to do at the school level could be thought of in three sort of steps. You know, universities are places where young people come, and it can be a super transformative experience for them. They're not just getting some skills for graduate school or the workforce. They're also often, for the first time, really confronting who they are, what they believe, where their beliefs come from. You know, so we've got to develop, you know, the opportunities for them to gain the skills that will take them where they want to go. We got to help people deal with the tremendous anxiety people are feeling, but we also have to help people sort of unpack their own forms of prejudice, their own biases, and sort of take responsibility for some of this and hold themselves accountable for the roles that they're playing and that they're going to play going forward. And we got to create that opportunity. And part of creating that opportunity of encouraging people to take responsibility and ownership and accountability is through what we do on campus. And I think that all the things we're talking about, you know, integrating even more than we have justice and race into some of our curriculum and our extracurricular activities and our service activities, and continue to try and find ways to diversify the student body and the staff and the faculty. These are important things, but we also know that we really need to buckle down on mentoring of subpopulations on the campus to make sure that they're getting what they need to flourish. Because there's no reason everybody shouldn't be able to flourish on this campus. But we don't always know how to support every sub in the right way. And so we got to learn that. We got to invest more time into doing those sorts of things. And I think that, you know, we have a lot of diversity on the campus. We also seem to have, in my opinion, some silos. So we need to figure out, how do we break them down and get people interacting? You can't really confront your own sort of biases if you stay in your own group the entire 4 years or 5 years that you're here. So we need to do that. So it's personal and it's sort of curricular, institutional. I think that the great thing is that out there in the rest of the world, there's a lot of people who are concerned about this, but they're looking for guidance. They're not sure what to do. If somebody says to you, you know, a typical sort of statistic, 13% of the population is Black, 38% of the prison population is Black. That shocks lots of people. But then they don't know exactly what to do. Does that mean we need policing and profiling? Does that mean we need to diversify people who are sitting on the bench who come in with their biases? Does that mean we need legal counsel to people from, you know, economically more compromised backgrounds? There's a whole lot of paths forward, and our research can help people understand and navigate a complex issue. So I think that in all those levels, helping individuals become accountable, creating a more supportive environment on the campus, and using our skill set, our research ability, critical thinking ability to help the rest of the world navigate a really complicated issue, be able to nudge us away from pessimism and sort of being overwhelmed to realizing that we can make a lot of these things manageable in terms of what an individual or group can do. And we can have people leaving this university feeling more agency, more empowered, and so on. So that's what I think we're trying to do right now. And of course, we want to do it in partnership with you.
So not only do we want to do it, but we only have 4 minutes left. So I don't know if we can go over slightly, but I want to turn to one of the first questions that came in, which is a huge question. This came in when we first began our forum today, and that was a request to discuss the background behind the Black Lives Matter movement, something we're not going to be able to do in a short amount of time. But the person who posed this question suggests that it's important to pay attention to why this movement exists, why Black people feel oppressed, who are the oppressors, what issues have the oppressors caused for Black people. And I think that, and this person who posed this question has suggested that it's important to look at the origin of these issues before we turn to challenges and solutions. So we don't have a lot of time, but I think this is nonetheless a really important point. And I want to link it to another question that came up, which was to return to a point that Michelle made. This person asks, how does the school plan to address the problem that Michelle highlighted? The courses which focus on racial justice and racial issues are not taught by people of color or by Black scholars. I think this is important. Related to the other question, these seem linked, because one of the solutions would be to have more courses to teach more about the history of oppression, but then Michelle also highlighted the problem of who's teaching those courses. So I don't know if anyone has thoughts about either of those issues, and we have quite a few questions we're not going to get to unless we go over.
One comment that I want to make that was also brought up in the chat is that using POC as an umbrella term to say Black people is incorrect. And I think that if you mean to say that you want to hire more Black people or you wanted to support more Black students, then grouping them under POC is not correct.
Thank you for that. So I apologize for misphrasing things. Does anyone have other comments about how we might address that issue of hiring more Black faculty, of having those courses taught by Black faculty?
I want to take, as a psychologist, I recognize my positionality here is going to be different from a staff member or I guess as faculty, but nonetheless, I want to approach it. I think it's one thing to talk about diverse hires. So obviously we can widen the recruitment pool. We can look in different places, listservs, be more connected to national and international organizations to increase diversity in recruitment. But if we're taking from like a company or organizational perspective, we also want to make sure that we're talking about the inclusion aspect, and not just inclusion as like a second step, but also so that the staff can feel supported, just like students are asking to be supported. And so that staff feel that they're connected, they're supported emotionally, financially, their research is funded, etc. And that's going to help in retention, because diversity hires is just the first step. So that's a good intention, but what's the impact actually looking like? And the impact, we can look more into the I in terms of the inclusion. So that, just from an emotional standpoint, I wanted to share that.
Do we have time to go over? It's 3 o'clock. Should we end right on time? We have unanswered questions, but what is your feeling about time? It is 3 o'clock. I want to be respectful of everyone's time.
I can do another 15 minutes.
Okay. If anyone needs to leave, let me just tell you, please feel free to do so, because obviously, you've only committed to a certain time. Another question that came in on the Q&A had to do, it's specifically for Dr. Jazz, I'll just read it. What is the framework behind how a person identifies as Black? I'm half African American, and in this movement I find myself kind of confused where I stand because my background comes from two different worlds. Additionally, I also have to deal with how people of color and white people perceive me as a person from both worlds. Dr. Jazz, do you have any thoughts?
That is, I would say, a course in and of itself. But, what I will say is there is such thing as racial identity development models. There's Black racial identity development. There's white racial identity development. all types of racial identity development models, but the Black racial identity development model by Janet Helms, I believe, that is what I would encourage you to kind of research and look up and read about. But essentially, there are different stages of Black racial identity. Some people may not have even been aware that they are Black until they have a racist encounter. And then, you know, there are stages after that where you may be really upset at the oppressor. Then you may also be pro-Black, or you may get to a place where you're kind of accepting of your social location because you realize that people are going to see you as Black and aren't, you know, you're not as upset or anything like that. So, I mean, that is like super touching, scratching the surface of it. There's much more details, but there are racial identity development models. And so I just would encourage whoever that was to kind of research that out and read a little bit more about it.
There's another question. Can you hear me? Another question asks about the perspective of international students. The question says, I want to know what the school is doing for international students and for students who are conservatives, whose identities are not primarily grounded on race, but are grounded on other cultural values. These people agree, I'm summarizing, that racism is wrong, but in a country that is so divided in our communities, the events these days, the Black Lives Matter movement, the discussion about white supremacy are making others who hold different views on race feel like they cannot share or speak about their views, which seems to be dividing us further. Is the School of Social Ecology considering these students who may not always speak up or share their views? Would anyone like to consider that question? How do we handle the perspectives of international students who are coming from different cultural contexts?
Yeah, I can take a quick stab. I mean, that's a very difficult question. And we obviously want to be sensitive to all people who feel marginalized, excluded, minimized in some way. But we don't want to kind of downplay the Black Lives Matter movement. I know that's been really the struggle. I mean, you know, our country unfortunately has a history of discrimination and oppression. You know, we're kind of against lots of people. Black Lives Matter is in the forefront right now, and rightfully so. And certainly it's, you know, a very clear and undeniable trajectory, but we, you know, we want to be an inclusive environment. And I know that UCI as an administrator, I mean, people really do value inclusion and inclusive excellence. You know, in the implementation, as Richard mentioned, it may fall short, and some of it may be we just don't even realize, like, you know, we may say something that we don't mean in a way, but we need you to help tell us what we said was wrong as we did, you know, or we should say it this way, we should do that way, because it hasn't been an issue that we've discussed for very long and really kind of brought front and center. And so we need help too. And we certainly don't want to further marginalize other people. And, you know, when I first came, I'm in California. When I left and I came back and I had done some work on the, you know, with the reservations, I'm like, the situation of Native American people in this country is just horrendous, and in the state of California, and you know, so there's so many issues, and there's so many ways that people are marginalized and excluded. And I think, as you know, Richard and Susan mentioned, our focus on social justice is really a focus on inclusion and connection and changing systems, but you know, we need to prioritize. We need to somehow find a way to kind of find a lane that we can drive in that doesn't offend other people, but also doesn't minimize the situation in the moment. And so if you can help us out, that would be great. I don't know, Richard, if you have something quick to add.
But quickly, that you know, I think one of the difficulties the generation of college students is facing today is just the number of big complicated issues. Because whether it's pandemic disease or climate change or racism, there are a lot of big complicated issues which are weighing down on people very, very heavily. There's lots of intersection among them, but they're also, you know, they've all got their own networks and advocates and so on. So of course at a university, we've got people who are saying climate change is our biggest challenge. If we don't deal with this, there will be nothing in 50 years. And other people saying we've got to deal with microbial threats because we're running out of medical solutions, and this is going to set back world health by 30 or 40 years. So there's a lot of things, and I think it's very overwhelming. One of our roles in social ecology is to try and make this less overwhelming to people. And it's going to involve, the recognizing that people there's a pluralism on campus, pluralism of concerns and aspirations and visions and so on. And we have to be respectful of that. We can't bullet those things and make everybody focus on climate change or everybody focus on something. We have to somehow recognize that there are several powerful, complicated issues right now demanding our attention. And the school is a good place to look at, each of those issues, but also the intersections, because one of the sad things is that vulnerable populations tend to be in a precarious position in relationship to a whole lot of things: racism and drought and flooding and poverty and lack of health care and so on. They tend to intersect. And I think that's a very overwhelming realization.
But I will just share encouragement and empowerment for you, and inviting folks to consider the importance of voting at multiple levels. And that will be my comment for right now.
Yeah, and actually the late John Lewis said that voting is the most powerful nonviolent tool we have. So just in respect and memory of him, it just seemed like I just need to slide that in there.
Actually, thank you for adding that, Jez. That's beautiful. I also, as we're talking about the social justice through the lens of politics, I suppose, going back to the original question of the student, I think it was a combination of international identity as well as a political identity, persuasion, orientation, if you will. And so I want to encourage folks to think about ourselves as multicultural beings. So to be direct, as a Black man, that's my racial identity and my gender identity. And also knowing that our national identity and our political identities can intersect, and they always do. And we can honor them in different ways. And we deserve to be supported in multiple ways. So I just wanted to share that to the question, I think, a little bit ago there.
So from the chat, I'm going to just read a couple more questions from the question and answer, and then I want to bring forward some of the comments from the chat, because I think, I don't know if everyone can read the chat or how that works, but in the question and answer, there's a question specifically for Saad about how to get involved in student initiated mental health issues. And I think there's also a question about whether the School of Social Ecology will commit to diversifying school leadership. So those two sort of how to get involved and what about diversity in school leadership. So maybe while you're thinking through those two questions, let me just pull forward. Can everyone read the chat or just us? Everyone can read it. No, but can the audience members read it? They can? Because there's some important comments people are making about the importance for everyone of being able to, says, agree with the point that everyone deserves the ability to be able to talk to someone professional to discuss mental health, even if they're not someone who suffers from mental health problems. There's a question about increasing the admission of Black students, the importance of hiring more Black staff, crediting Michelle for that comment. Let's see. Yeah, I think a great place to start is by supporting Black psychology majors, because they're the future of Black mental health. I think having a Black psychology course, if not series, that includes the history of Black psychology and the works of Joseph White is very needed. Someone wanted us to go over, which we are. Okay, educate yourselves is recommended. I'm just kind of bringing forward some of these comments. To increase Black faculty, we should constantly bring up and stress the importance of this to the people in charge. We need to be a more welcoming setting. let's see, those are, I didn't get to all of them, but that's a lot to read in a short time. Does anyone want to address the two questions that I began with alongside those comments about diversifying school leadership and about how to get involved in mental health issues or any of the issues that came up that I just read?
I think I could speak on for one thing about the getting more involved in the mental health aspect is I know for ASUCI, we have a whole commission dedicated to mental health in the Office of President. I know Michelle was personally a part of that. And I know that they do a really good job of pushing mental health and doing the best that they can. So it's definitely one thing I know is that their applications for interns for that will be coming out next month. So be on the lookout for that. Michelle, if you want to speak on more about it, I wasn't too involved with it, but I just know they do a phenomenal job.
Yeah, thank you, Saad. So I am a part of the ASUCI Mental Health Commission, and we put on a conference that didn't happen last year, sadly, but we put on a conference every year to discuss mental health and its implications on students. And so I would definitely encourage people to apply. But I think in terms of diversifying leadership, part of the issue is that we don't even know all of the opportunities that we have. And so something as simple as making sure that these organizations are putting out applications, not just to their circle, but to the entire student body or to Black people, period, that would help a lot with diversifying leadership.
I definitely agree with that because sometimes we don't even know that about certain opportunities and then we miss out on them and then we don't have that representation. Dr. Milo, I know, and Dr. Jazz, I know you two have to leave right now, and I want to just say real quick, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules, and I appreciate both of you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I apologize that I do have to jump off, but something that I wanted to highlight in the past, about 5 years ago, I did teach a class through social ecology called Ensuring Black Lives Matter. And I think that was a really helpful discussion, approaching the movement from the eyes of a psychologist. And so I just wanted to share that and also just give gratitude, encouragement, and empowerment to all of my fellow panelists, but also to all the students who are watching. Just want to make sure that you know that you are supported and you're not alone as we continue to navigate these challenging times. So.
You're on, Dr. Milo. Can you teach it for us this year?
I might hear my fiance calling me. Okay. But thanks for having me, everybody. Lots of gratitude.
And then I just wanted to also, say my thanks for inviting me to this panel. I feel like, again, this is only the beginning. And so there has to be more, like we can go for a long time today talking about this stuff. And so there has to be more space for these types of conversations to happen. But I think, I just want to hone in on, you have to also do the internal work. It's not enough to have external things happening. I know people have their thoughts, but Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror song is really powerful. If we all took a look at ourselves in the mirror and make a change, the world would be a better place. Like it really would. So I highly recommend doing that internal work. The other thing that I'll leave you all with too is sometimes universities have the tendency to clump diversity, inclusion, equity, equality together. But really, when you take a step outside and really pay attention to what they are and how they differ, then you'll probably recognize where some of those terms are falling short. And so that's why some people's needs aren't getting met, because we tend to clump diversity, equity, equality, and inclusion together, but they all are different. They all look differently. And so if we really take a step at what we can do for each one of those and not clump them together, then there will be a little bit more feeling like needs are getting met around the campus. But thank you all for having me.
Now, I think we really are out of time. I want to thank Dr. Jazz, Dr. Milo, Michelle, Saad, of course, Richard Matthew, Nancy Guerra for taking the time for this really important conversation. And I want to reiterate that we will follow the advice to continue the conversations. I think that's certainly very important. And, we've taken notes on this event, and we'll also, keep a record of not only continue the conversations, but don't lose what we already discussed. So I think with that, we'll end, and stay tuned for news about the next forum. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. All the folks who attended. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. If your question was not answered or you need anything else, please email me. I put my send an email down there. And if you also want to set up a Zoom, set one up. I'm pretty much free. I'm done with summer session, so I'm down to meet with any time. Thank you very much.